I was walking past a construction site the other day, one of those massive residential towers going up downtown,
Yeah.
and I stopped to watch for a second. It struck me how ancient it all looked.
Ancient in what sense? I mean, they're using cranes and modern equipment.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But just the process. You see mud, concrete, guys in hard hats shouting over this incredibly loud machinery. And there are still stacks of paper blueprints flapping in the wind. It felt so analog.
Right.
And then later that day, I went home to deal with my own lease renewal, which, I kid you not, involved printing out a PDF someone had emailed me, signing it with a wet ink pen.
Ah, the classic wet signature.
The actual wet signature. Then I had to scan it and email it back. It feels almost medieval in the age of the smartphone, doesn't it?
It really does. And you've just hit on something fundamental. When most people think about real estate, traditional real estate, that's the image that comes to mind. It's dusty. It's slow. It involves a frankly alarming amount of paperwork that, let's be honest, nobody actually reads because you just want the keys.
Exactly. Just scroll the last page and sign.
It feels like this giant, immovable brick-and-mortar beast that hasn't really changed its core processes since, I don't know, the Victorian era.
That's a very common and, for a long time, a historically accurate perception. The property industry was essentially the land that time forgot. It was deeply conservative. It was incredibly heavy on manual processes. And it viewed technology with a very healthy dose of suspicion. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Pretty much, if it wasn't broken, and more importantly, if the rent checks were clearing, why would you change anything?
Right, but the stack of research we have in front of us today suggests that this dinosaur is waking up. In fact, it suggests the dinosaur is currently learning to code and is, sprinting. We're looking at an industry in total transition.
Absolutely. We're looking at the disruption agent, the force that's causing all this change, known as PropTech.
PropTech. It sounds snappy. I like it.
Oh.
But before we get lost in the weeds of all this research, let's unpack that term. What exactly are we talking about when we say PropTech?
At its core, PropTech, which is just short for property technology, is the application of information technology and, this is the key part, platform economics to the real estate industry.
Well, platform economics. That sounds like a term straight out of a business school textbook. Can you translate that for me in the context of, say, buying a house or renting an office?
Yeah, of course. Think of it this way. It's not just about putting a listing on a website. That's sort of PropTech 1.0. Platform economics is about creating these digital spaces, these marketplaces, where producers and consumers can connect directly.
So cutting out the middleman.
In many cases, yes, or at least reducing the need for intermediaries. In real estate, it's about rewriting the fundamental rules of how we buy, sell, rent, design, construct, and manage the spaces where we live and work. It's about taking all that friction you felt with your lease renewal and just smoothing it out.
Making it disappear.
Yeah.
And I noticed in the reading that there is a significant crossover with another tech sector we hear about constantly.
Yes, FinTech or financial technology, you'll see a massive, massive overlap there.
And that makes perfect sense. Because at the end of the day, for most people, real estate isn't just a building. It's the biggest financial transaction of their lives.
Precisely. The two are completely intertwined. So things like online payment systems, digital mortgage applications, booking systems, crowdfunding for property development, that is the intersection where PropTech and FinTech sort of hold hands.
So if you're using an app to pay your rent every month, or you go online and use an algorithm to get pre-approved for a mortgage in 10 minutes.
You're standing right at that intersection. It's about digitizing the flow of money just as much as it's about digitizing the process of finding a place to live.
So our mission for this deep dive seems pretty clear then. We want to see how these digital dashboards, artificial intelligence, the sharing economy, and even smart sensors are changing the game. We want to understand how we got here and, maybe more importantly, where all this money is flowing. But I want to start with the why. Why now? What is the core problem that PropTech is actually trying to solve?
If you had to boil it all down to one single word, that word would be friction.
Friction.
Yes. Historically, the entire life cycle of residential real estate is just defined by friction. Think about the process of finding a home, say, 25 years ago.
It was a nightmare. I remember my parents doing it, driving around for hours on a Saturday looking for sale signs, calling agents who never seemed to pick up, waiting for someone to fax a listing sheet to you.
Right. A blurry black and white fax. It was incredibly high effort. Then think about selling a home, then financing that purchase, and then the closing process. My God, the closing, you're dealing with valuation, title searches, escrow accounts, title insurance.
The stack of paper at the closing table is always an inch thick, at least.
And then even once you actually own it or rent it, there's the ongoing management. A pipe bursts, the AC goes out. Every single one of those steps has traditionally been a major friction point. High effort, high cost, and very low transparency.
It's so true. You usually have absolutely no idea what's happening in the black box of the transaction. You just get these cryptic updates and wait for a phone call from a lawyer saying it's done, or, the dreaded, we have a problem.
Exactly. And the primary goal of most real estate technology, especially on the residential side, is to grease those gears, to reduce that friction. But it's not just residential. This extends to commercial real estate, construction, urban planning, everything. The sources we're looking at today break PropTech down into 5 major pillars or categories, which is a really useful way to get a handle on it.
Okay, let's walk through these pillars because I think this helps organize the chaos. The first one is something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie: smart buildings and IoT. And IoT is the Internet of Things.
This is a huge and rapidly growing category. This is all about the physical hardware in a building and the software that talks to it. And we're not just talking about asking Alexa to turn on the lights in your living room, though that is, the consumer edge of it.
Right, this is on a much bigger scale, like a whole office tower or apartment complex.
Exactly. In a commercial context or a large residential complex, this is all about operational efficiency. It's about monitoring the heartbeat of a building in real time. You have sensors on the HVAC that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. You have sensors on the lighting, on the security systems, on water flow, on elevators, on environmental monitors.
And what's the payoff there? Is it just a cool feature to tell investors about? Or is there a hard return on investment?
Whoa, it's all about the money. I mean, it is cool, but it's about cutting costs. If you can monitor exactly how energy is being used, you can optimize it minute by minute. If you know that the east side of the building is getting blasted with sun at 8 a.m., the building management system, the BMS, can automatically lower the blinds in just that zone and ramp up the AC there while turning it down on the shaded west side.
So it's granular control instead of just blasting the AC for the whole building.
Precisely. You stop wasting energy on empty rooms or floors. Over the life of a building, that adds up to millions of dollars in savings.
That makes total sense. But the notes also mention predictive maintenance. I love the sound of that. The idea of fixing things before they actually break.
This is the real game changer for asset managers. It's a huge deal. Imagine a skyscraper with, say, 20 elevators. In the old days, you just waited for one to break.
And it always breaks at 5 p.m. on a Friday with people inside.
Always. It stalls between floors, trapping people. It's a crisis. Residents are angry. You have to call the repair company, pay emergency rates, and that elevator is out of commission for 3 days. It's a nightmare scenario.
The classic out-of-order sign taped to the door.
Exactly. With IoT, you have sensors on the elevator motors. They're constantly monitoring vibration, heat, and speed. They can detect a slight anomaly, a wobble that a human would never feel, or a temperature spike of just 2 degrees. That is a known precursor to a specific type of failure.
So the system knows the motor's getting sick before it has any symptoms.
That's a perfect way to put it. The system analyzes this trend data and generates a work order automatically. It says, motor in elevator 7 is showing signs of bearing fatigue. Schedule non-emergency maintenance within the next 2 weeks.
So the elevator gets fixed at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday when no one is using it, and a crisis is completely averted.
Precisely. It shifts property management from being reactive, constantly putting out fires, to being proactive. And that saves a fortune in emergency repairs, but also in tenant retention. People get fed up with broken amenities and they leave. This helps keep them happy.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Let's move to pillar number 2. AI and data analytics. This feels like the buzzword of the century, but how does it actually apply to bricks and mortar?
This is all about processing massive, and I mean truly massive, volumes of market data. Real estate as an industry generates a ton of data, but for decades that data was locked away. It was in filing cabinets, disconnected spreadsheets, or, simply inside the head of a local real estate agent who'd been in the business for 40 years.
Right, that institutional knowledge.
Exactly. AI allows us to synthesize all of that and much more at a scale and speed that's just impossible for a human.
So give me a real-world example of this that a listener might have actually encountered.
The most common one for the average person is the AVM, the automated valuation model.
Ah, right, the Zestimate. When you go to a website like Zillow or Redfin, you type in your address and it instantly spits out a number. Your house is worth $452,000.
That's AI. And the early versions were pretty basic. They just looked at comparable sales in the area, square footage, number of beds and baths.
And they were famously not always accurate.
Famously inaccurate at times, yes.
Yeah.
But they're getting much, much better. The newer models are using things like computer vision.
Computer vision. Do you mean the AI looking at the photos of the house?
Exactly. The AI scans the listing photos. It's been trained on millions of images. It can identify features and assess their quality. It can see, oh, that's a Viking range and a Sub-Zero fridge in the kitchen. Or those kitchen cabinets look like they're from 1985. Or that carpet is heavily worn. It can even analyze the text of the listing description for keywords.
That is wild. So it's adjusting the valuation based on the actual condition and features of the property, not just the raw stats.
Precisely. It's adding a layer of qualitative analysis that previously required a human appraiser to physically walk through the house.
So it's basically a super brain for figuring out what stuff is worth.
And it's not just for buying and selling. It's used for rental price forecasting, telling a landlord exactly what they should charge to minimize vacancy days. It's used for sophisticated tenant screening, looking at more than just a credit score. And for the big players, the huge investment funds, it's used for portfolio optimization.
So instead of just a gut feeling that, I don't know, Austin's getting hot, they have data points showing migration patterns, job growth statistics, and building permits before the prices even spike.
Exactly. The AI can identify emerging markets or submarkets right down to the neighborhood level that humans might risk. It removes the guesswork and the emotion.
Okay, let's move to pillar 3. This one sounds a little less sexy, but I have a feeling it's the engine room of the industry: management and operations platforms.
It might not make the headlines like AI does, but you are spot on. This is the back office revolution. This is where the actual day-to-day work gets done. We're talking about cloud-based software as a service, or SaaS, platforms for lease administration, maintenance requests, accounting, and tenant communication.
So basically getting rid of all the filing cabinets and sticky notes.
Completely. This is for landlords, asset managers, and corporate real estate managers. It's all about creating transparency and a seamless workflow. Think about the old way. A tenant has a leaky faucet. They call the landlord's office. Maybe they get an answering machine, leave a voicemail. The property manager listens to it later, writes the details on a sticky note. That sticky note gets lost under a pile of papers. Maybe they call a plumber a day later. The plumber sends a paper invoice 3 weeks after the job. It's a mess.
And meanwhile, the tenant is furious, and the water damage under the sink is getting worse and worse.
Exactly. With these new platforms, the tenant opens an app on their phone. They snap a photo of the leak, maybe add a quick note, and hit submit. The system automatically reads it, categorizes it as a medium priority plumbing issue, and routes the work order to the company's approved plumber.
And the plumber gets a notification on their phone.
Instantly. The plumber can accept the job on their phone. The tenant then gets an automatic notification. Mario the plumber is scheduled to arrive between 2 and 4 p.m. tomorrow. When the job is done, Mario marks it complete, maybe uploads a photo of the repair, and the invoice is generated digitally and flows right into the landlord's accounting software.
I can see how that connects directly back to that friction point. If you're a landlord with 500 units, doing that old process on paper is just impossible to scale.
It's pure chaos. With these platforms, it's a single dashboard. The landlord can see their entire portfolio's health in real time, who has paid rent, what maintenance is outstanding, what leases are expiring next month, all on one screen. It allows one person to manage a portfolio that used to require a team of 5. It scales the ability to manage property efficiently.
All right, pillar number 4. This is the one I think we're all most familiar with. Digital marketplaces.
Yes, this is absolutely the most visible consumer-facing side of PropTech. The online portals, the listing services.
The Zillows, the Redfins, the Rightmoves of the world.
Correct. These platforms fundamentally revolutionized the search function. Before these existed, if you wanted to know what houses were for sale in your town, you had to call a real estate agent or look in the newspaper. There was a gatekeeper. Information asymmetry was the entire business model.
I remember looking at newspaper listings with my parents. You'd get one tiny, grainy, black and white photo and a 3-line description. Charming fixer-upper with potential.
Which was code for dilapidated shack that needs to be torn down. And you had no idea if the price was fair because you couldn't easily see what the house down the street sold for 6 months ago. That data was locked away in the multiple listing service, the MLS, which only agents could access.
So the agent held all the power.
Completely. Digital marketplaces broke that open. They brought transparent pricing, extensive photo galleries, virtual tours, school ratings, crime maps, and real-time engagement. They leveled the playing field between the buyer and the seller.
It really empowered the consumer. You can sit on your couch at midnight and browse homes in a city 1,000 miles away. You can become a local expert before you even talk to an agent.
Exactly. It decoupled the search process from the physical location of the buyer and the agent. It was a monumental shift.
And finally, pillar number 5. This one feels very, very current given the global focus on climate. Green PropTech.
Sustainability. Yes, this is becoming a massive driver in the industry, especially in commercial real estate. Green PropTech involves everything from energy management software to tools for ESG reporting.
And ESG is environmental, social, and governance.
Correct. It's a framework for evaluating a company's or a building's broader impact.
What's driving that? Is it just tenants wanting to be eco-friendly, or is there a bigger hammer behind it?
It's both, but the hammer is getting much, much bigger. Regulatory requirements are tightening everywhere. Cities like New York, with Local Law 97, and London are passing very strict laws that will heavily fine building owners if they don't reduce their carbon footprints and improve their energy efficiency.
So it's about compliance. If you don't comply, you pay.
It starts with compliance, but it's quickly becoming about value. We're seeing what the industry calls a brown discount emerging in the market. An old, inefficient building might sell for less because the buyer knows they'll have to spend millions upgrading it to meet future regulations.
And the opposite is a green premium.
Exactly. A building that is LED certified or has a high energy efficiency rating can command higher rents and a higher sale price. And Green PropTech provides the tools to measure that consumption, report it to regulators, and identify the most cost-effective ways to reduce it. It provides the proof.
So if you have the data to prove your building is green, it's literally worth more money. The tech makes the invisible visible.
That's a great way of putting it. It turns energy efficiency from a vague concept into a hard number on a balance sheet.
So we have these 5 pillars: smart buildings with IoT, AI, and data analytics, management platforms, digital marketplaces, and green tech. It feels like a really robust ecosystem now, but as you said, it didn't just appear overnight.
No, not at all. And this is where it gets really interesting. To understand where we are now, we have to look at the timeline. The sources we're looking at divide the history of real estate technology into 3 distinct stages.
I love a good timeline. Take us back. Where does this story actually start?
We have to go back to the 1980s, stage 1, the PC era, which runs from about 1980 to 2000.
The era of the giant beige desktop computer, the floppy disk, and very questionable fashion choices.
And crucially for real estate, the era of the spreadsheet. When personal computing became common in offices and software like Lotus 1-2-3 and then Microsoft Excel was introduced, it was a quiet but profound game changer for commercial real estate companies.
It sounds funny to think of Excel as disruptive tech, but I guess before that, everything was done on ledger books with calculators.
Exactly. Imagine you're an analyst trying to calculate the internal rate of return, the IRR, on a 30-year commercial mortgage by hand. You have to account for variable rent increases, expense inflation, changing tax laws, depreciation schedules. It's incredibly complex.
And if you wanted to change one variable, like what if interest rates go up by 0.5%?
You had to start over. You had to recalculate the entire ledger by hand. It would take hours, maybe days. So you just didn't do it. You couldn't really model different scenarios. You just had to pick a path and hope for the best.
Or you kept the deals incredibly simple.
Precisely. Excel allowed for instant what-if analysis. You change one cell, and the entire financial model updates instantly. This allowed investors to become much more sophisticated in how they structure deals. It let them manage larger, more complex portfolios. It wasn't flashy consumer tech, but it was the first step in digitizing the math behind the real estate industry.
So the 80s and 90s were all about digitizing the back office math. Then we hit the year 2000, stage 2.
We enter the dot-com shift. This ran roughly from 2000 to 2008. This is the period when the internet transitions from a niche academic tool to a household utility.
And we saw the great migration from print to digital media across every industry.
Right. In real estate, this is when companies started targeting consumers directly with online listings. The absolute dominance of the newspaper listing died in this era. We saw the first wave of companies putting property listings online. You didn't have to wait for the Sunday paper anymore.
But the internet back then was still, well, let's call it Web 1.0. It was pretty static, wasn't it? You could see a list, but you couldn't do much with it.
It was very much brochureware. You saw a few pictures and a phone number. You still had to pick up the phone and call. The user experience was clunky, but it was the critical first step in breaking down that information barrier we talked about.
Which leads us directly to stage 3, the high-speed era, starting around 2008 and continuing to the present day.
What changed? What was the big enabler?
Well, a couple of things, really. But the main technological drivers were bandwidth and mobile, the widespread availability of high-speed internet, and the launch of the iPhone in 2007.
Right, suddenly you had computing power and an internet connection in your pocket.
And that allowed for the cloud migration. Services and data could move fully online and be accessed from anywhere. This is when a company like Zillow really took off. They weren't just putting a list of properties online, they were layering it onto interactive maps. They were moving geographic data, valuations, tax records, and advice onto the web. You weren't just looking at a list, you were exploring a dynamic, data-rich environment. And this era also gave birth to something else that's mentioned in the source material, the sharing economy.
Yes. This is a critical cultural and economic shift that ran parallel to the tech improvements. Platform economics allowed property owners to monetize their assets in a completely new way.
We're talking about the rise of Airbnb and WeWork here, right?
Precisely. Before this, a house was a place you lived in or a place you rented out on a long-term, one-year lease. It was a binary state, occupied or vacant. Airbnb came along and said, no, this is a flexible asset you can rent out for 3 days while you're out of town.
It fractionalized the use of the asset.
Exactly. WeWork did the same for office space. Instead of signing a 10-year lease for an entire floor, a startup could rent 3 desks for a month. It turned real estate from a fixed, long-term asset into a flexible, on-demand service.
That is such a fundamental shift. Space as a service. It's not just a piece of technology. It's a complete change in mindset about what ownership and utilization mean.
It is. It's all about utilization. A spare bedroom is empty most of the year. A house is empty when the owner is on vacation. That's wasted capacity. Airbnb created a platform to unlock that capacity. It made the asset more productive, and that required incredibly sophisticated tech to handle the bookings, the payments, the reviews, the insurance, and the trust verification.
And that productivity, that unlocking of value,
Mm.
that attracts attention. And by attention, I mean money. I was looking at these investment numbers in our notes, and they are genuinely staggering.
They really are. If you follow the money, you can see exactly when this sector went from a niche interest to a major focus for venture capital. The 2010s were the golden age for PropTech startups.
Okay, so give us the highlights. Let's trace the explosion.
Let's look at 2015 as a key inflection point. In that year alone, investors poured $1.7 billion into the sector across about 190 deals.
$1.7 billion. That's a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of Silicon Valley, is it a huge number?
It's the growth rate that tells the story. That 2015 figure was a 50% increase from the year before. But here's the crazy part. Compared to the funding levels in 2011, it was an 821% increase.
Wow. Okay, so in 4 years, funding went up more than 800%. That's not just growth, that's a rocket ship.
And it didn't stop there. It accelerated. By 2017, global investment reached $8.5 billion. But then look at 2019. In just the first 6 months of 2019, VC funding hit $12.9 billion.
Wait, say that again? In 6 months of 2019, they raised more than the entire record-breaking year of 2017.
Exactly. It was an absolute gold rush. VCs and investors finally realized that real estate is the largest asset class in the world. We are talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars globally, and it was severely underdigitized. The potential for efficiency gains, and therefore profit, was just astronomical. They saw it as the last great frontier for tech disruption.
But then, of course, the world hit a giant wall. 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic. How did that impact this rocket ship? Did it crash it, or did it somehow add more fuel?
It acted as a massive, and I would say painful catalyst. It jolted management companies and landlords out of their business-as-usual mindset.
I can imagine. Suddenly, you literally can't do in-person viewings. You can't pass physical papers back and forth for signatures. Your entire business model is broken overnight.
Right. If you didn't have a digital solution in place, you were dead in the water. The pandemic forced the laggards to adopt technology. It accelerated the adoption of IT solutions for remote management and closing deals without any physical presence. Things like digital notaries, virtual 3D tours, these went from being nice-to-have gimmicks to business-critical tools overnight.
I remember looking for an apartment online during the pandemic. The 3D tours got incredibly good really fast. You could walk through the entire space on your screen, even measure the walls.
Exactly. Companies like Matterport, which creates those virtual tours, saw their business explode. And on the commercial side, the impact was even more profound and complex. The pandemic turbocharged e-commerce, which absolutely crushed traditional retail. That had a huge impact on commercial real estate valuations.
And then there's the whole work from home phenomenon.
The death of the office narrative. It forced office managers to rethink everything. They had to start thinking about things like air quality, occupancy tracking, and flexible socially distanced space.
Right, because nobody wanted to touch a button in an elevator or sit in a crowded room breathing stale air.
Exactly. All those smart building IoT technologies we talked about earlier, they suddenly became health and safety features. If you could tell your corporate tenants, we have sensors monitoring air quality in real time, and we've optimized the HVAC system for maximum fresh air exchange, that became a critical selling point to get people to feel safe coming back to the office. It shifted the value proposition from efficiency to well-being.
So we have the history, we have the money, we have this massive pandemic acceleration. But I want to talk about what's happening right now at the cutting edge, because the sources mention some things that still sound very futuristic, but are actually being implemented today.
One of the most intriguing and honestly most hyped areas is the use of blockchain in real estate.
Now, when people hear blockchain, their mind immediately goes to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But we're not necessarily talking about buying a house with crypto here.
No, although that does happen in some niche cases. We're talking about the underlying technology, the distributed, immutable ledger. In real estate, blockchain is being explored for two main things: land registration and tracking property ownership.
Why do we need that? I mean, isn't the county clerk's office with their big book of deeds good enough?
In many developed countries, yes, it works, though it's incredibly slow and paper-based. Think about the process of a title search. When you buy a house, you pay a title company hundreds or thousands of dollars to send someone to dig through 50 or 100 years of dusty records to make sure the person selling it actually owns it and that there are no liens against it.
And that can take weeks and is a major bottleneck in the closing process.
Exactly. If the title, the deed, is tokenized and recorded on a blockchain, it creates a secure, immutable, and instantly verifiable record of ownership. You could theoretically confirm the title in seconds, not weeks.
So it's about trust, speed, and cost reduction.
Yes. And in the developing world, this isn't just an efficiency game, it's revolutionary. The economist Hernando de Soto talks about the concept of dead capital. There are trillions of dollars in assets held by people in developing nations. They live on land, they've built houses, but they have no formal legal paper proving they own it.
So they can't use that asset. They can't get a loan against it to start a business or pay for education or improve their home.
Exactly. It's capital, but it's dead. Blockchain provides a potentially secure, cheap, and incorruptible way to create and formalize these property records. It can empower billions of people to enter the formal financial system. It's an economic empowerment tool on a massive scale.
That is a huge potential impact. It's way more important than just making the closing process a few weeks faster for a suburban home buyer, though I'm sure they'd appreciate it too.
Absolutely. Now, another really interesting trend mentioned in the sources is the growing involvement of government. Usually, we think of tech as the private sector running wild, but the sources highlight the UK government specifically getting involved.
Yes, this is a fascinating shift. PropTech isn't just for profit-seeking companies anymore. It's entering the realm of town planning and the public sector. The UK government actually launched a PropTech Innovation Fund.
What's the goal there? What are they funding?
Initially, one of their big focuses was on what they call citizen involvement solutions.
That sounds very bureaucratic. What does it actually mean in practice?
Okay, so imagine a new high-rise development is proposed in your neighborhood. Traditionally, how do you find out about it? Maybe a small notice is posted, and there's a town hall meeting on a Tuesday night that almost nobody goes to. And the people who do go are usually the ones who are really angry about it.
Ah.
It's not a representative sample of the community.
Right. It's usually just the loudest voices shouting, "Not in my backyard!"
Exactly. A citizen involvement solution might be a digital platform, an app, where you can see a full 3D model of the proposed building right on your phone. You can spin it around. You can see how the shadows will fall on your garden at different times of day. You can see the projected traffic impact, and you can leave structured feedback directly.
So it's about democratizing the planning process, making it more accessible and transparent for everyone, not just the people with the time and energy to show up to a meeting.
Precisely. Instead of a flyer on a telephone pole, it's an interactive experience. And more recently, they've been looking at using PropTech for land assessment, helping the government get a much better data-driven understanding of the built environment so they can make smarter decisions about where to build schools, hospitals, and transit lines.
That is a crucial point. So much urban planning has been done with very old maps and outdated census data. Using real-time data could make our cities much more responsive to actual needs.
It's a huge opportunity. Okay, there's one more term in the sources that I absolutely have to ask you about. Sounds a little ominous, a little dystopian. The automated landlord.
It does sound a bit like a sci-fi villain, doesn't it? This term refers to the increasing automation of property management functions. We touched on it earlier with the maintenance platforms, but the sources specifically mention using technology like AI and natural language processing, or NLP, to extract data from lengthy and complex rental documents.
This is the AI that can read and understand a legal contract.
Right. Think about a large commercial landlord, like a REIT, a real estate investment trust. They might own hundreds of office buildings and have 10,000 different leases. Each one is a 50-page PDF with slightly different clauses, different renewal dates, different rent escalation rules.
That is a data management nightmare, a human trying to keep track of all that would make mistakes.
It is. And if you miss a critical date, like a renewal deadline, it can cost you millions of dollars. The automated landlord technology uses AI to scan all these documents, extract the key data points like rent increases by 3% on January 1st of each year, and feeds them directly into the management system. It automates rent collection, lease renewals, and even compliance checks.
So you could theoretically rent an apartment, live there for years, pay your rent through an app, request repairs through a portal, and move out without ever interacting with a single human being from the management company.
Theoretically, yes. For the landlord, it's maximum efficiency. It reduces headcount and human error. For the tenant,
Well, that's where the big debate lies. Does it make things easier and more responsive, or does it remove the essential human element of empathy and understanding?
right. If you're a day late on rent because of a sudden medical emergency, an algorithm might not care. It just sees a missed payment and automatically sends the eviction notice. That's the risk. Efficiency is great, but housing is a fundamental human need. Finding that balance between cold, hard automation and human-centric management is going to be one of the biggest challenges as this tech becomes more widespread.
That's a heavy thought. It brings us right back to that central tension between efficiency and humanity, which seems to be at the heart of all this technological change.
It is the central question of technology in the 21st century applied to the places we live.
So let's try and wrap this up. We've gone on a pretty wild journey here. From Excel spreadsheets in the 1980s that just digitized the math, all the way to AI-driven valuations, blockchain land registries, and smart buildings with sensors that know when your boiler is about to break.
It's been an incredible period of acceleration, and the common thread through all of it really is data. It's about capturing data, analyzing data, and using that data to make better decisions in the built environment. And then using technology to remove all that friction that has plagued this industry for centuries.
It seems like the brick-and-mortar industry is finally becoming the click-and-mortar industry.
I see what you did there. But yes, that's absolutely right. The digital and physical worlds of real estate are merging.
So what's the final takeaway? What's the one big thought the listener should be mulling over as they walk past a construction site or browse Zillow on their phone tonight?
I think the most provocative question to leave with is about that government involvement we mentioned earlier. For the past decade, we've watched PropTech make landlords more efficient, real estate agents more productive, and investors richer. And that's fine. That's how capitalism works.
It's been about optimizing the asset.
Exactly. But with developments like the UK's Innovation Fund and these citizen involvement apps, the really interesting question is the next phase of PropTech less about managing buildings for profit and more about democratizing how our cities are planned and lived in?
So are we just optimizing the assets for maximum financial return, or are we on the cusp of using this technology to optimize our communities for people, for livability, for equity, for sustainability?
That is the frontier. Can this incredible wave of technology actually help solve the housing crisis? Can it be used to make our cities more equitable and more livable for everyone? Or will it just make the rich richer? That's what we need to watch next.
That is a fascinating and incredibly important place to leave it. Thank you for walking us through this incredible stack of research.
My pleasure. It was a great conversation.
And thank you for listening. Keep looking at the buildings around you. There's a lot more going on inside them and behind them than you might think. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.